In the middle of a growing narrative that Oscar Piastri had lost direction and could no longer withstand the pressure of a title fight, Qatar became the weekend that flipped the discussion. Piastri controlled every competitive session: sprint qualifying, the sprint race, and the main qualifying session with a lap that set a new benchmark. The driver, who was said to be short on confidence, delivered the most stable performance on one of the most demanding circuits of the season. He trimmed the gap to Lando Norris down to 22 points, stayed ahead of Max Verstappen in every meaningful phase of the weekend, and goes into Sunday as a genuine contender. This was not the behaviour of a driver whose mentality had collapsed. It was evidence that the recent slump was more technical than psychological. But Qatar's story extends beyond lap times. The reaction inside the McLaren garage became a talking point in its own right. When Piastri took sprint pole, the pit wall's response appeared unusually muted, sparking debate about whether the team's enthusiasm leans more naturally towards Norris. It was only after securing a 1-3 in the sprint and pole for the Grand Prix that the atmosphere looked noticeably warmer. That places McLaren in a sensitive position. They must support two drivers still in the title fight, while the public scrutiny intensifies around their internal balance. With Norris able to clinch the championship with a win, and Verstappen waiting for any opportunity to exploit, Qatar becomes a decisive moment in a three-way contest. The question is whether Piastri's momentum is strong enough to disrupt Norris's clear path on Sunday. If you want the full breakdown, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. What made Qatar so significant is how sharply it contradicted the storyline that had built over the past 2 months. Since the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, Piastri had not appeared fully comfortable. A run of 6 races without a podium, a DNF in Baku, and several scrappy weekends had led critics to draw conclusions about his mental state. Guenther Steiner said bluntly that Piastri had lost his mojo, and that the lack of full team support had left him doubting himself. Martin Brundle described the fallout from Baku as having left him mentally shattered. Timo Glock questioned whether Piastri's mental strength had been overestimated and suggested he had become unsettled as Norris reeled him in. Former world champion Alan Jones went as far as to say Piastri was destroyed mentally and would inevitably be overtaken by Verstappen. Those weren't fringe opinions. They were amplified across the paddock and on social media, especially as Norris overturned a 34-point deficit earlier in the season to build a meaningful lead. Qatar, however, presented none of the traits that had fueled those criticisms. From the moment Piastri turned his first laps in practice, he looked at ease on the Lusail circuit: high speed, high grip, physically demanding, and generally unforgiving. That environment punished hesitation, yet Piastri's sessions were clean. He led sprint qualifying, led the sprint race from lights to flag, and then produced a lap record in Q3 to secure pole for the Grand Prix. His comments after the sprint reflected a clarity he had lacked in recent rounds. "It was nice to have some clean air again," he said. "It makes a pretty big difference. Everything has gone smoothly so far, and I feel like I've been able to gel with the car pretty good." He dismissed the suggestion that this surge was the result of anything more than conditions aligning. The last couple of weekends, there's just been things going wrong rather than a lack of pace. It was an understated explanation, but it matched what was visible on track. Norris, on the other hand, entered Qatar knowing he had the mathematical advantage. A win on Sunday would seal his first world title, irrespective of what Piastri or Verstappen achieved. He was confident after practice and sprint qualifying, and even said he was convinced he would have been on pole in the main qualifying session. The first run in Q3 supported that belief. He held provisional pole by 0.035 seconds. But turn 2 on his final attempt became the decisive moment of the session. The understeer arrived sooner than expected. He had to back off and the lap was immediately gone. "I had to abort," Norris said. "I was going to go off the track. The understeer got worse as I went through the corner." Andrea Stella detailed the moment even more clearly. "He didn't go off track, but he was about to. He needed to back off and brake to avoid going off, so at that stage the lap was just gone." It left Norris starting from the dirty side of the grid, exactly where he didn't want to be on a circuit where start performance is shaped heavily by track surface. Piastri, running behind, did not waste the opportunity. He improved in the first 2 sectors and secured pole by over a tenth. For a driver accused of losing his edge, it was the perfect counterpoint, clinical when the pressure was at its highest. Across the weekend, Verstappen played a quieter but still pivotal role. Red Bull struggled with bouncing throughout Friday and Saturday, and Verstappen made clear that the issues were compromising both his pace and his ability to follow closely. "The bouncing is still very bad," he said after the sprint. "We fall into that window where we struggle on the tyres." Asked about his chances on Sunday, he was pragmatic, acknowledging the two-stop requirement and the unpredictability inherent in a race with heavy tyre degradation. Anything can happen. The competitive picture before the Grand Prix is straightforward. Norris leads the standings with 402 points. Piastri has 380. Verstappen sits on 376. If Norris wins, he is champion. If Piastri or Verstappen win, the fight continues to Abu Dhabi. The three fastest drivers of the year line up first, second and third at a circuit with limited overtaking opportunities and a punishing tyre profile. That mix alone gives Qatar the potential to become one of the season's defining weekends. Yet the competitive narrative is only part of the story. The atmosphere inside McLaren has become a meaningful subplot. The reaction from the garage during Piastri's sprint pole was notably muted. Several clips circulated on social media, accompanied by comments describing the garage as looking like a funeral home. Fans compared it to the far more energetic celebrations usually seen when Norris tops a session. Those perceptions aren't objective truth, but they influence the pressure dynamics around a team. McLaren has been keen to project unity throughout the season, and figures like Zak Brown made sure to celebrate the 1-3 sprint result openly, hugging both drivers and congratulating the team in Parc Fermé. But the earlier reaction revived the discussion about whether the team's emotional centre gravitates more towards Norris. Piastri himself has downplayed any suggestion of favouritism, saying internal discussions have made the team's priorities clear and cooperative. Norris, meanwhile, has been public about staying focused and ignoring noise, even when engaged in mind games with Verstappen. After Verstappen claimed he would already have won the title if he were driving a McLaren, Norris responded that Red Bull tended to talk nonsense a lot of the time. That exchange added another layer to the Qatar weekend, a title fight that has tactical, psychological and political elements woven through it. On paper, McLaren should be positioned to manage both drivers fairly, especially with the Constructors' Championship already secure. But the stakes for the drivers' title inevitably sharpen the internal dynamics. Both drivers know that the start in Qatar is critical. Norris said plainly, "Probably just the start is my opportunity. I'm on the dirty side of the grid. I don't have the highest expectations." Piastri, starting from the clean side, knows he must convert the advantage into track position early. Verstappen, directly behind both, will attempt to minimise his weaknesses over a long first stint and exploit any misjudgment ahead. The tyre rules imposed for safety reasons, a maximum of 25 laps per set, guarantee a minimum of 2 pit stops. That removes a strategic wildcard but increases the importance of track position. With overtaking already difficult, the first run to turn 1 may prove of greater significance than any mid-race decision. The final question then is, how much of what we saw in Qatar is sustainable pressure reversal, and how much reflects the unique characteristics of the circuit? Piastri has an opportunity to keep the title fight alive, silence his critics further, and alter the championship tone heading into Abu Dhabi. Norris can close the season entirely on Sunday. Verstappen, who has lacked the machinery to dominate this weekend, is still within reach should chaos unfold. So with 3 title contenders lined up on the front row and a season's worth of pressure compacted into one evening in Qatar, which driver will control the race when the lights go out, and which of them will see the title slip a little further from their hands?